Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. We love this time of year, with the canola fields in full bloom and sights set squarely on harvest. It's also a good time to start thinking about summer crops though. We begin with Sunup's Dave Deacon and our Extension Cropping System Specialist, Josh Lofton.
It's just about that time of year to be thinking about summer crops. And Josh, what should producers be looking at in their fields right now?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We were talking about winter crops and canola and wheat last week, and now is already time to start switching over to summer crops. But it's never too early because we know that there's a lot to do before your summer crop system. And it really just depends on what kind of system they're going into. Our no-till guys probably have a field that looks very similar to what we're standing in. There's probably a lot of early season weeds that are coming up, especially guys that have gotten a lot of rain. With those warm temperatures, a lot of rain, that's just a candid time for those early weeds to be coming up. So if we have a field that kind of looks like this and we're going into a no-till situation, it's time to be putting out the burn down chemistries. It's time to be controlling this right now, because essentially if you start clean, you're going to have a better system than if you try to manage those weeds after you've already planted. Guys that are doing a conventional system, going in with some sort of tillage, if you got a little bit of time, it's time to make those initial heavy tillage applications. You're probably a little late for those on a typical basis, but if you've already made those heavy passes with your initial tillage operations, it's probably time, especially if you're going into corn or milo, it's time to start making up those finishing applications, especially if we're wanting to start planting here soon. The guys in the conventional have to worry about is, as far as I can see, there's no moisture in the forecast. So the least you mess with the soil with steel, the more moisture you're going to have in your soil. So don't just go tilling just because you want to go till. Make sure you're actually doing something with that application, either smoothing off right in front of the planter before you go plant, or if you have a weed issue and you're trying to get rid of the weeds. But just know, especially if you're trying to manage weeds ahead of a cropping system and you do a little heavier tillage, the moisture might not be there at planting. You might have to delay a little bit.
Well, you talked about one of the crops that producers are going to be working with this summer. Corn. It's already time to start putting it in the ground.
Yeah, it's time for corn. A lot of guys have already started to get corn in the ground. There's probably quite a bit of patches, and I'd expect a lot of the corn to get into the ground if you got moisture in the next several weeks, as well as milo. It's also time to start thinking about milo. The one thing you have to check is your soil temperature. Mesonet has a great thing to start, but unless you have a mesonet site in your field, it's best to always just go out and check the temperature of the soil that you're going to be planting in, because sometimes it's going to be a little cooler than others. We talk about our winter crops of planting our no-till first and then our conventional. Well, when we talk summer crops, it's time to plant conventional first because they warm up faster. They typically aren't going to hold the moisture as long as our no-till, which typically are a lot cooler and hold that moisture. So if you have both, make sure your conventional, if it has moisture and it has a good soil temp, that go in and then get into your no-till. But like I said, with corn and milo, it's time to start thinking about it right now.
What's the temperature range on planting corn and milo?
Well, you want to have soil temperatures between about 55 and 60. It can go in a little cooler, but just know that germination and growth are going to be a lot slower. What I'd like to see is it get more towards that 60 to 65 mark. That way we know for a corn crop that typically guys are trying to beat the heat, that it gets up, it gets going, it gets some strong early season growth. That way it kind of moves into that good vegetative growth. It takes advantage of these great sunny 80-degree weathers before we turn 100 degrees later in the summer, which we know it's going to happen.
Now let's talk about those no-till folks who are holding on to their field this year and just letting it go fallow. What should they be doing?
Yeah, a lot of times we think in fallow fields, it's just, that's a field that's fallow, we don't have to manage it. But it's optimum time for managing things like our critical weeds. So for example, if we're going into milo, if you got a lot of Johnson grass and you're laying off maybe to go into canola or early season wheat for stalkers, it's time to manage that Johnson grass because, in the milo production system, we're very limited on our chemistries. The same thing goes for a lot of our broadleaves. If you got mare's tail, if you've got palmer, water hemp, especially if you got resistant weeds in your field, You have a lot of chemistries to play with when there's not a crop in the field. The one thing you got to think about though is think of what you're going into next year. If you're going into let's say a canola next year, trying to get that early canola growth, make sure you're not going to get something that has a rotational restriction with canola. Go out and put an SU out right now, and don't plan on putting a cert canola out in the fall, because that's going to be an issue. So make sure you check your labels, make sure you check your rotational restrictions. But if you're laying off this summer in fallow, especially in these no-till, now's the time to start managing those critical weeds, because it gives us a lot of flexibility that we don't typically have in cropping system.
Okay, thank you much, Josh. And for more information, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.